elsewhere to their children who are fighting in the front or their husbands who are fighting on the front lines. CNN senior national security correspondent Alex Marquardt is live from Kyiv, from the Kyiv region. So, Alex, the third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine delegations apparently just wrapped up. There was apparently some small progress, we're told, made on the issue of humanitarian corridors, although I feel like we heard that the last time as well. What do you know?
Anderson, this was the third round of talks, as you noted. The Russians are saying that there will be more. It's always good when discussions are happening, but now after 3 rounds of talks, it does not look like really much progress was made. The Ukrainians saying that there was some small progress in terms of the understanding of how these corridors should work. But at the same time, the Russians are walking away from these talks. We just got some comments from them calling the Ukrainians difficult partners and saying that their expectations were not met. Keep in mind, both sides are coming into these talks from very different standpoints. The Russians want major expectations to be met by the Ukrainians, like them agreeing not to join the EU or NATO, or Ukraine agreeing to recognize Crimea as part of Russia and those eastern breakaway provinces as independent. That's not where Ukraine is right now. Ukraine wants to make sure that there's a ceasefire. They want the fighting to stop. They want Russian troops to withdraw. And they want to make sure that civilians can get to safety. So the conversations are continuing, but we don't know if there's any sort of concrete progress on these humanitarian corridors, which, remember, the ones that Russia has suggested would have Ukrainian citizens walk into Belarus or into Russia. That is certainly not where they want to be. And Anderson, earlier today, we heard the French foreign minister talk about how this is straight out of the Russian playbook. This is what they do. They bombard, then they suggest that a corridor is set up. They go to negotiations. That corridor then comes under attack, and the Russians accuse the other side of a provocation. Everything falls apart, and they go straight back to bombing. And that is what we have seen over the course of the past few days. In fact, the Russians today, just today, in those talks, accused the Ukrainians of violating the agreements over those corridors, of Nazis, they said, firing on the Ukrainians who are trying to get out. So it does not appear that much progress was made in this third round of talks, Anderson.
A U.S. defense official says that Russian forces are, in their words, increasing bombardments of major Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv, Kyiv, as well as Mykolaiv and Mariupol in the south. What's the latest on that?
Well, this was a significant fear. You know, here we are more than a week into this war, and Russia has not made much progress on the ground. So the concern was to make up for it, that they would start stepping up their aerial bombardment, and that it does appear to be what they are doing. We're hearing increasing comparisons to places like Aleppo, to Grozny. And what that means is that it's starting to look like Russia wants to bomb Ukraine into submission, that they are starting to lay waste to civilian areas. You know, of course, they've been claiming since the beginning that they're only going after military targets. We know now that that is absolutely not true. We are seeing an increasing number of civilian targets hit, whether that is government buildings or large residence blocks or schools, anything like that. And so when it comes to Kyiv, which of course is the first prize, or the top prize for Russia, they are stepping up their efforts to encircle it, particularly from the north and from the west. Their troops have really moved in. They've been flushing out people who are trying to, who are desperately running away from those areas, trying to evacuate. We've seen those forces coming in to places like Irpin, which is yesterday, where that horrific scene unfolded with a bombing or shelling right on an evacuation checkpoint, killing 4 people there and 8 people all told. We've seen Russian tanks moving into residential areas. So it is clear that the Russian forces are trying to push in closer. We believe that their intentions are to come farther south and to fully encircle the city and to try to cut it off, of course, and to decapitate this government. We've heard from the mayor of Kyiv, who said that the Russians are acting with rage and that they are going after civilian targets with absolute indiscrimination. Anderson.
You also were reporting on a Russian strike that killed civilians in a residential town. Talk about what you saw there. What happened?
I think that's a perfect example of what we've started to see more and more of. This was a village that was 15 miles just south of the capital. It's an area that people live in before they commute into work most days. It was largely empty by the time we got there. Many people had fled. Now this missile strike, we believe, by the Russians happened on Friday, and by the time we got there yesterday, there was just one lone, small country road that was surrounded by rubble. And when we got there, there was this large crater, which was the home of Igor Muzhiev. And we spoke with him. He's a 54-year-old man who had just lost 5 members of his family and a family friend. Among those who were killed were his 12-year-old daughter, who was in a wheelchair after having been in an accident with a drunk driver, and his wife. It was just an absolutely devastating scene of, and speaking to a man who had lost it all, his home, his family, who didn't know what he was going to do next. And it really just spoke to really 2 things, Anderson. The fact that, this was far from a military target. There was absolutely no justification by the Russians to bomb this area, and yet they did, causing so much damage to just one family, and that is taking place all across the country. And it also speaks to the question that so many Ukrainians are now facing: do they stay or do they leave? Do they try to ride this out? Or do they become part of the hundreds of thousands, now more than 1.7 million Ukrainians, to leave this country? Anderson?
Yeah, the man able to stand there and talk to you after his wife and child had been killed, it's just extraordinary. Alex Marquardt, I appreciate it. Thank you.